Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Kelly Palmer.
Good morning. I'm Kayla David.
Welcome to Be Well Live. We are happy to be with you this morning. Welcome to those of you who have not joined us before. Kayla and I are part of the healing department at Family Service of Rhode Island. And Be Well Live is one of our favorite things to do. We come together and discuss various topics related to wellness and coping and how to cope with the COVID-19 pandemic. For those of you who are not familiar with Family Service of Rhode Island, we are a social service and behavioral health organization that has been serving Rhode Island for over 125 years. We offer a variety of programs, including telehealth counseling.
As Sarah said, we'll be joining together today and every other Wednesday at 10 a.m. For the past year, we've been focusing on topics related to how to cope with the COVID-19 pandemic. However, as we move forward, we are going to incorporate general wellness topics because we know while the pandemic is not over, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So as you know, in our last segment or a few segments ago, we talked about reentry, really trying to figure out how do we kind of reenter and what comes up while we're reentering because we're kind of in a new phase of the pandemic and also a new phase in terms of mental health, which is why I'm excited to talk with everyone today. With that in mind, we want to encourage you to tune in. So please take a moment to share this with your friends or to start a watch party. Help us reach as many people as we can with this important information about wellness. And we know that more than ever, it is important for us to be able to reach out if we are struggling or to help our loved ones be able to connect with assistance if they are struggling.
So Kayla, I feel like the topic that we're focusing in on today is something that we really talk about every segment, right? But it's the importance of paying attention to our mental health. And for those of you who aren't aware, May is Mental Health Month. And this year, there's always a theme for Mental Health Month. And this year's theme from the National Alliance on Mental Illness, otherwise known as NAMI, is You Are Not Alone. And, you know, I was thinking back, Kayla, because we have been doing this now for over a year. And I think, you know, the theme really resonates with me because that's one of the reasons why we started Be Well Live, right? To make sure that people weren't feeling alone during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think that theme really kind of hits home. I think the COVID-19 pandemic has called new attention to the importance of paying attention to mental health. And that's why we have worked hard here on Be Well Live to stress that if you or a loved one are impacted, you are not alone.
Yes, and it's so important, Sarah, to pay attention to your mental health, to our mental health, as well as the mental health of our friends and families. I think that one thing the pandemic has contributed to is letting people know that mental health struggles are common, right? It's been a huge part of the conversation in the pandemic, in the literature that we're reading, kind of in the dialogue in our communities is around mental health. So many people are impacted by mental health and mental illness, yet the stigma around mental illness still remains. And that's why we have our guest today to join us. So we are very happy to have a special guest today from Rhode Island's chapter of NAMI, the Executive Director, Beth Lamarre. Welcome to Be Well Live, Beth.
Hello, hi.
Welcome.
So many of us are touched by mental health, either personally or perhaps we have a loved one that is impacted by mental illness. We are so grateful for NAMI's efforts to call attention to this topic and put it in the forefront. So let's start with having you share with us about what NAMI does as an agency and what you hope to accomplish during this year's May is Mental Health Month.
Sure. So in a nutshell, what we do at NAMI Rhode Island is provide support, education, and advocacy around mental health and mental illness. And we accomplish that by a number of activities and initiatives. Most notable are our educational courses and our support groups, which are available for individuals living with mental health conditions and their families. And then we also provide presentations, awareness presentations, and informational to schools and community groups around the stigma of mental health topics. And we promote advocacy efforts around all of the issues that are going on, both at the federal level and state level, that can impact mental health services.
So Beth, you do such great work, and especially I'm so glad you mentioned the educational portion and the presentations, because I think those are so impactful and are really a great way to kind of dispel myths and kind of decrease the stigma. But for our watchers out there who aren't sure what we mean when we talk about stigma related to mental health and mental health conditions, what is stigma around this topic and why is it a problem?
So stigma in general is just any kind of a negative connotation that comes along with a concept or a condition or a person or group of persons. And in this case, the stigma around mental health is just, I want to say throughout history that people who had mental illness were oftentimes separated. And we've done a really good job in the past several decades of integrating everyone into the community and providing services within the community so they're not physically separated, but somehow that just never came together socially. So that stigma still remains that people who have mental illness are different, or perhaps they need to be separated. And that's a terrible, terrible feeling to live with if you yourself have a mental illness. And it's a terrible concept for us to perpetuate. So the stigma around mental illness basically is a problem because it's going to keep people from seeking the services that they need to better themselves and their mental health.
So that's so important. That leads to my next question, right? Stigma is a huge barrier, but what other barriers are you seeing to people accessing mental health treatment?
Oh, the list is long, and I wish that it wasn't. But some of the most common things, I mean, stigma is huge. That's probably number one. But there are also a lot of just different cultural reasons that people don't access mental health, either the internal cultural there's an additional stigma there. It's not just the societal stigma that we place, but there are also different beliefs about how to treat mental health in different cultures. And so perhaps the way that we view American medicine isn't the way that people's culture vibes with treatment. And so that's another reason, but also sometimes a lack of cultural competence in the providers. And of course, just money and insurance. There are so many mental health treatments out there that are not even covered by any insurance or are covered so little by insurance, and people cannot afford those services out of pocket. So those are a lot of the primary reasons. And then you wouldn't think this because Rhode Island is so small, but we do have geographical barriers. So public transportation, as we know, doesn't reach all corners and isn't as accessible for folks who live outside the main hub of Providence. And so that also contributes because as you move further and further away from the city, the services are fewer and fewer, but so is the transportation. Yeah. So those are a lot of other barriers I think that we see most in Rhode Island.
Great. Thank you, Beth.
And Beth, May is Mental Health Month, and we talk a lot here when Kayla and I come together about the importance of tending to our mental health and, for our loved one as well. And I think a lot of people might not really pay it too much mind, and don't really realize how common mental illness is. So can you kind of share with us how common is it? And why we should be talking about this and kind of raising awareness?
Sure. The statistics that we hear that we use at NAMI are that 1 in 5 adults self-report having a mental health condition, which means the number is probably higher because there are probably some due to stigma that don't report that, or who don't seek treatment, or who never get diagnosed, or whatever the case may be. So we're going to say a minimum of 1 in 5. And then with all of the things that have gone on in the past year-ish around the pandemic, I think that situational depression and situational anxiety are definitely on the rise. It's becoming more relatable. People understand those feelings a little bit more because maybe it's something they haven't experienced themselves before now. But I will say that we've heard through NAMI National in their hotline, it used to be that the top 2 reasons for people calling in were resources around bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. And during the pandemic, that changed. And the top 2 reasons people call in now are anxiety and depression. So I think that, it might be 1 in 5 statistically, but I think more than 1 in 5 understand that experience.
And Beth, can you speak to some of the common myths about mental health conditions or mental illness that, we've talked a little bit about that, contribute to the stigma and ultimately make it so that people aren't maybe accessing treatment when they need it?
Yes. One of the biggest that's the most heartbreaking thing to me, is that there are so many misconceptions out there about mental illness. And it's not just contributing to the stigma that others have, it's contributing to people's own self-image too, because it's really difficult to get over that hump of, maybe I really do need treatment, or maybe I really should talk to someone about the things that I'm experiencing. But some of the stigma is internal. So, some of the myths are that people who have mental illness are dangerous, which is rarely the case, that they're a danger to other people, rarely the case, that they're criminal, rarely the case. Usually it's the reverse, in that people who experience mental health conditions are oftentimes the victims of violence and other crimes. So that's probably one of the most common. Another is that people think, oh, if I have a mental illness, or if so-and-so in my family or my friend network happens to have a mental illness, that they're going to be hospitalized, or they're going to be on medication for the rest of their lives. And if I take medication, I'll be a zombie. But you hear all of the worst case scenarios, and unfortunately people apply it to everyone, or assume it applies to everyone. And that's really just not the case. Very often it's just about finding the right treatment. It doesn't mean you have to take a medication at all. Never mind be on the medication for the rest of your lives. Every single person's treatment is going to be different from every other person's treatment. So we can't put a blanket statement to everyone who has mental illness and say, oh, this is what it's going to be like for me or for my family member. And I think those are probably the most common myths, but we hear so many. When we do school presentations to youth, like middle school and high school students, and some of the things that they come out with, it's like unbelievable. These poor kids. And it's no wonder that people are afraid to seek treatment, because no one ever talks about the good experiences, I don't think. And you only ever hear the worst case scenarios. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Beth, because I think, we know, I mean, that's a common thing with media, right? They like to sensationalize the bad, right? And not necessarily highlight the good or positive things that can come out of going to therapy, or, right, engaging in a group. So I'm so glad you brought that up. So you mentioned COVID-19, right? This has been a really difficult year for everybody collectively, I think. Can you share a bit about how the pandemic has impacted your work, or even impacted this idea of stigma around mental health? Has it opened people's eyes up more to how common it is, or has it, can you just kind of share what it's been like for the past year and a half?
Yeah, I think, and I hope that more and more people are gaining an understanding of what it's like to experience a mental health condition. We do get more media requests, so I do think the topic is getting more attention, which is great, because then we can do better work to dispel all of those myths and dispel and decrease stigma. We're also getting more requests for presentations for community-based organizations and or businesses. Schools are having us more involved. Even the schools we were at before, we're doing presentations to a greater number of students. And we have our volunteer requests are on the rise for individuals who want to speak about their own experience, or who want to help facilitate groups, who want to get involved in our events. And then there's the downside. There is also an increase in people who are going to need services. I think that just the nature of the pandemic, physical isolation, additional stress is causing people to reach out, which is great. But I think people being home and not having access to all the things that they ordinarily had access to in the past took away a little bit from people's internal support networks. Mm-hmm. And so they're realizing, maybe for the first time, that they do need more help. Mm-hmm. Which is great that they're reaching out. We've definitely seen an increase in requests for our support group links. All of our support groups are taking place on Zoom, and we get requests daily from individuals and family members looking for groups.
Great. And what can an everyday person do to help fight the stigma around mental health conditions or mental illness?
Well, be an ally, basically. Listen to people without judgment. be there for them, be a support. Even if you don't understand, just provide an ear, and then you don't have to be the one who understands it and can dissect like what exactly is going on. You just need to be there for people. Provide resources. So either through us, through NAMI, or through other organizations and other initiatives that are in your area, and just talk openly about mental health and make it more of an everyday subject. So that's what the everyday person can do, is make mental illness an everyday topic. If we talk about it like we talk about other health issues, then that stigma is just going to go away. Like, you would never blame someone for diabetes. You wouldn't shun them because they had knee surgery. And if we can normalize it to talk about mental health issues the way that we talk about those sort of physical health issues, then there won't be stigma.
That's a great tip, Beth. What is the best first step for someone to take if they are struggling perhaps with mental health condition, or if they see a loved one struggling? Where's a good place for them to go?
Talk to somebody in your life who you trust and implicitly, and you can talk to about anything. Having somebody in your own little network, your own group of people, is a great first start. And then reach out for other resources. Maybe it's a support group. We offer support groups for individuals and for family members. And we use the word family pretty loosely. That's any loved one who is a part of your family network. Maybe reach out to a local therapist or to a psychiatrist. Maybe reach out to BH Link, which is the state's behavioral health, mental health emergency resource. And if need be, if none of those things are available to you in your moment of need, then call a crisis line. We've got the NAMI National Crisis Line, which is 1-800-950-6264. They're available Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. They also have a text line, which is 24/7, and you just text NAMI to the number 741-741, and you'll get free confidential crisis counseling services. There's also the 1-800-273-8255 or TALK, which is the suicide prevention hotline. And then again, like I said, you can contact BH Link locally, or you can contact NAMI, and we can provide some additional resources for folks to get in touch with.
Great. Thank you, Beth. I think that's the hardest piece, right? Whether it's a family member or it's a person struggling, just that first reach out, especially when we're in crisis, to make that connection is so important. And we often don't talk about the resources, right? Because we don't talk about mental health. So then we don't know where to turn. So having that information is so helpful. So for May is Mental Health Month. What are some activities that people can engage in? What does NAMI have going on during this month, and what is going on across the state?
We have a bunch of activities going on. I'm going to plug something that's happening today at 4 p.m. We have a program called Ending the Silence, which is a presentation that is hosted by two presenters. One is a staff of NAMI who puts on an informational PowerPoint, and then is followed by a young adult speaker who talks about their own journey around their mental health condition, how that started when they were young, and how they're getting help today, and how they're living well now. And so Ending the Silence is presented to three different audiences. It could be for family members, it could be for teachers and school staff, or it could be for students. This afternoon's presentation is primarily geared towards teachers and school staff, but truth be told, anyone will get the same resources out of that. The only difference between that and the other two iterations of it is just the way in which the resources are presented. The student speakers are all fantastic, and just hearing a young person's story about how they struggled when they were in school and how they're doing well, and they're all so young still, in their early 20s, it's really empowering, and it's really moving. So I encourage people to take advantage of all of our free presentations, including that one. We are holding the same Ending the Silence for students on May 17th at 6 p.m. And that would be appropriate for whole families to watch together if they were interested. You can find the links for that on our website at namirhodeisland.org/ETS. And then we also have all of our regular support groups and classes going on. So if folks are looking for support groups or are looking for educational courses around mental illness, they can reach out to us to get registered for those. And then the big one, the big kahuna, is our Bridging the Gaps annual conference around mental health. That is taking place virtually on May 26th, beginning at 9 a.m. We've got some great topics lined up. We're going to be discussing things such as, I hate to call it law enforcement alternatives, but traditional law enforcement alternatives. So programs that are going on that dispatch maybe peers or mental health crisis counseling along with law enforcement if they're called to a behavioral health crisis. We've got some interesting topics from peer perspectives, individuals who are living with mental health conditions. We've got some great stuff going on around youth and mental health, featuring yours truly in my top corner over there, Kayla. And we just have such a robust program that day. For members, the conference is free and it is very low cost for non-members, but I do encourage folks to check out membership on our website. And all of that information can also be found at NAMIRhodeIsland.org right on our homepage, as well as all of the other news of things that are going on for Mental Health Month. So the other partners that are involved are across the state. I think there are about 100 different individuals who are on our shared network of events. We promote others' programs and events through our social media. So give us a follow. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and all of those can be found on our website as well. So just one quick spot to go to for all of those things would be NAMIRhodeIsland.org.
That's awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to share, Beth, as we wrap up? This has been really, really helpful, and you've shared so much great information. Is there anything else we've missed that you want to make sure we get in?
I don't know that we've missed anything necessarily that comes to mind. I feel like I've talked a lot about the programs that we have going on, but I just really thank you very much for having me. We're just really trying to get the word out about everything that NAMI does. And it's just so important that we, not just in Mental Health Month, but all the time, make sure that we're promoting these resources to folks, because the hardest thing is to reach out. So if we're doing the reaching, then we're making it just a little bit easier for individuals and their loved ones.
Well, Beth, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you all that are watching for joining us. And we'll see you in another 2 Wednesdays for another Be Well Live. And feel free to visit our website for additional resources, FamilyServiceRI.org, or visit NAMI's website, NAMIRI.org.
Thank you very much.